Story 1. They are highly aware of everything around them, waking up at the slightest sound. If it's people talking, they stay awake and remain completely still. They can also recognize individuals based on the sounds they make while walking or moving in general. Story 2. Try not to rely on anyone. If a favor is done, try to pay it back immediately in some way, or explain heavily why there was no other choice, as if the favor will be used as a weapon later. Story 3. They try to keep their affairs as private as possible. The less known about them, the less it can be used against them. Story 4. Never ask for favors or help from anyone. They tend to distrust even those they care about and trust the most. Story 5. Subconscious soundless functioning occurs when walking quietly through the house or trying to avoid noise while performing tasks, such as loading the dishwasher. Story 6. Being calm in situations that would stress out the majority of people but getting upset over a very random niche situation for no reason. Story 7. Being ready to help with any task and possessing a wide range of skills without asking anyone for assistance, as if they would be considered a failure for doing so. Story 8. I grew up like this. My kids tell me I'm basically just coping mechanisms in a trench coat. Now I have a bonus child who needed a safe place to finish growing up. They have trouble sleeping, flinch at sounds, walk quietly, apologize for existing, and ask permission to eat. They are slowly getting more comfortable. I often tell them, it's okay to take up space. Story 9. Always aware of their surroundings, usually using only one headphone or low volume, even when alone at home, monitoring what is happening around them and who is passing by. They can recognize people by sounds, such as how they walk, open doors, or put something down. Story 10. Overly considerate of others, they often neglect to care for themselves. They do not treat themselves well and prefer things to be planned, as sudden changes disrupt their comfort. Story 11. Being able to push through intense physical discomfort, especially when things need to get done. Missing a meal or more without becoming emotional because there is a lot that needs to be accomplished. You might even miss enough meals to feel faint before realizing how long it has been since you last ate. Didn't sleep at all last night but are scheduled for a 12-hour shift? It will get done. Injuring yourself in a painful way that is not incapacitating but continuing to work until the task is completed before treating it. Ignoring illness until you become so sick that you end up in the hospital? How do you keep going? Why do you keep pushing instead of allowing yourself to rest, recover, and take care of your needs? Because you are accustomed to going without care. You have adapted to doing without. You don't believe anyone will carry the weight for a moment, so you cannot permit yourself to lay the burden down. Your pain, weakness, and exhaustion are often dismissed as being dramatic or seeking sympathy, unless they become so significant that they can no longer be denied. There has never been anyone you could consistently rely on. No one is coming to save you. Story 12. Apologizing for taking up someone's time is important, especially if they are the focus of the conversation. Story 13. Don't take off coats or set down purses in social settings where it is considered the norm. It seems to me that the urge to disappear when feeling trapped would be overwhelming. Story 14. Being extremely independent while also being overly hard on themselves if they cannot be reliable for others. Additionally, being described as mature for their age or having an old soul conveys the idea of acting as if they have already lived a long life. Story 15. My ex moved in with me a while ago. During the first week, we were making dinner when she accidentally dropped a plate, breaking it on the floor. She immediately started panicking, hyperventilating, and apologizing while insisting she would replace it as soon as possible. It took me a full 5 minutes to calm her down and help her realize that it was just a plate. I was more concerned that she might cut herself while trying to clean up the pieces with her bare hands. My ex wasn't perfect, but no one deserves parents who turn their children into that. Story 16. My grandparents survived the hunger winter during World War II. They always had their basement filled with food they packaged themselves, enough to last for an entire winter, full of glass jars and dried foods. We take food for granted too often. Having emergency money won't help when stores are empty. Story 17. They say it is okay even when it is really not, and they mean it not out of peace but out of habit. Story 18. Flinches or yelps at innocuous things like sudden hugs, unexpected door openings, car alarms, and unexpected banging or knocking. Story 19. Knowing when the volume or distraction level in a room, such as a classroom, meeting room, or workplace function, has reached a point that will soon prompt annoyance or a call for attention from the authority figure presiding over it, and being able to quiet down and present oneself perfectly before it happens. Story 20. When they don't relate to privileged discussions, they struggle to understand how people can talk about superficial topics. Story 21. It's so disheartening when you don't like reaching out for help. Then I do anyway and still get no assistance. I'm done asking. If I can't do it, then it's not happening. Story 22. Hi, survival mode kid here. I'd say the signs depend on the situation we had to survive. For instance, I am incredibly quiet. I'm averse to loud noises entirely and often startle people because they don't hear me enter the room or notice my presence. Why? Because avoiding my father was a survival tactic. I didn't want to be the one he decided to take all his anger out on, so I learned to be invisible. I also hid food. I grew up with 4 younger siblings who were also trying to survive. If you wanted food, you usually had to hide it somewhere because if you didn't, it was gone. I often hid food for my youngest sister as well. I still hide food these days, but it's more like snacks I don't want to share. Another sign is the "you're so calm in emergency situations" sign. A lot of people who grew up in survival mode are used to being in emergency mode constantly, so when a real emergency occurs, we're in familiar territory. It reminds me of that quote, "That's my secret. I'm always angry." Except it's more like, I'm always in emergency mode. Asking for help with anything is also difficult for me. I feel guilty for even considering it, and whenever I do ask for help, I feel I have to repay them in some way to avoid feeling like I've failed. If someone offers to help me out of the blue or out of the goodness of their heart, I have trouble trusting it. I feel like there must be a catch. Story 23. I will add my thoughts to the list. I constantly say sorry for everything, even if someone stubs their toe on a chair I never touched. I noticed it earlier and could have moved it out of the way to prevent the incident. The people around me have gotten used to this, but it is exhausting to feel at fault for everything. I have been working hard over the past few years to understand why this happens and to gradually stop apologizing. In my childhood, no one really knew how to talk to or handle me, making me feel like my learning disabilities were my fault for simply being lazy. This is just one of many examples. I was always the cute little oddball who was good at computers. I am still coming to terms with the fact that I am likely neurodivergent, but accepting that part of myself has significantly helped me stop blaming myself for everything that happens. Story 24. I try to fix or repair everything. I aim to make my shoes last a whole year if possible. I still go barefoot on weekends if the weather is warm, just like I did all summer as a child because my school shoes had worn out. Potatoes remain a main staple, and I know 100 different recipes for them. The smell of cooked liver repulses me now. No child should have to eat that regularly. I call out items like meat, vegetables, or eggs as store-bought. I save things like shoelaces, reuse Ziploc bags, and always shop for the best deals. My truck was built in 1994. What's surprising is that I own 3 houses, am completely debt-free, and earn over $100,000 a year. I am also 51 years old and have never fully overcome growing up poor. Story 25. Super focused on the details with a perfectionist mindset aimed at minimizing risks, even if the outcome isn't perfect. Somewhat like being overly cautious. I also appreciate the idea of never asking for help but always being ready to assist others. Story 26. They are interested in very speculative and fantastical media. When the world outside your mind is a mixture of disappointment and pain, escaping into another world is a tantalizing release. Story 27. Many of the comments here resonate with me, but I never thought I grew up in survival mode. I don't ask for help and I do a lot of chores silently. I am protective of my sleep, eat quickly, and don't waste food. I remain calm in most situations that would otherwise upset others. Now I am wondering how to improve my mental state. I never realized I might need help until this post. Story 28. I can read the energy of a room and sense the mood within about 3 seconds. I never knew which version of my mom I would encounter, so I developed a sort of intuition that I still use today. I can also criticize myself better than anyone else. It used to hurt less than criticism from her. Unfortunately, it has become my default mode. Therapy has helped a little, but I still struggle with feelings of self-worth. Story 29. I was a 15-year-old girl trying to survive on the streets of Chicago, alone. I'm 58 and still feel like I'm in survival mode. I own a home and have a successful career. However, I don't trust others, struggle with relationships, am an overachiever, and tend to be materialistic. I fixate on things and cannot let them go. I am overly generous but feel like I am never truly happy because I always want more. I tend to stock up on things excessively. I have trouble connecting with others and have zero tolerance for self-pity. Story 30. Not understanding normal societal behaviors such as being competitive with other coworkers because we have been too busy trying to survive. Story 31. Constant apologizing. I had a patient once who would say, "Oh, I'm sorry," about 50 times in a session. Even when I would just ask her to sit up or bend a knee. It was endearing at first until I realized she probably had a really abusive spouse or a difficult childhood. Story 32. Also, everything is fine or pretty good. There is no real range of motion. I am very strict with myself as well. Story 33. Assuming that any interaction with them is unpleasant or burdensome, and that there is a limited number of times they can interact before you may not want to talk to them anymore. Story 34. I live alone and still turn the music down because I don't want anyone to complain about the noise. Story 35. Constantly over-explaining and apologizing. I believe this thread can be summed up as general anxiety. Story 36. Stealth and hyper-awareness. My partner always jokes that I was an assassin in a past life because I can appear out of nowhere. I inadvertently startle them all the time. I hear and register every noise in the house, and they are amazed at my abilities. It doesn't feel powerful, though. It feels like nothing, because I only realized I do these things after having them pointed out. They have also observed that my siblings and I are experts at whispering because we can speak in very low and quiet tones. Story 37. Attunely aware of shifts in energy, whether in person or through text. We are not crazy, we just notice everything. Story 38. Compliments often feel insincere, especially from parents. Listening to their verbal conflicts every Sunday night as a child for 18 years really affected me. When I would share something, they would often use it against each other. I have about 4 people that I trust, while I keep everyone else at arm's length and rarely allow myself to be vulnerable with them. It's interesting, as I am recognized nationally in my field and have been traveling for this job for nearly 2 decades. There are people who know me, but no one truly knows me, and that's by design. Story 39. Hoarding sauce packets, asking for extra packets, and inquiring if peers have unused ones. Collecting them in a drawer at home and using them sparingly, never offering any to others. Story 40. These points resonate deeply when you've grown up with an alcoholic and abusive parent. It gives me chills just reading this. Story 41. Many of these feelings are relatable, but I haven't seen this one expressed yet. Crying silently by default, because nothing good ever comes from others hearing you cry. Story 42. When they express an opinion or feeling, and someone else expresses the opposite opinion, they immediately back down and agree with the opposing view. For some people, this feels manipulative, so it goes unnoticed. However, for others, they were punished if they ever even considered a viewpoint different from their parents. Story 43. Overly cautious about almost everything, primarily attentive to others' feelings instead of their own. Story 44. I feel absolutely terrified when my phone rings. The buzz from a call makes my blood run cold. My parents would constantly ask me who was calling, and I sometimes had my phone taken because of it. If it wasn't that, it was them calling to tell me I was in trouble for some reason. I suppose this illustrates how people can have strong fear reactions to the most ordinary things. Story 45. For me, it feels like coming back from having fun somewhere and getting the feeling that I am going to be in trouble when I get home. Story 46. Being a people pleaser means always allowing others to save face, pretending you didn't notice their mistakes or moments of vulnerability. Story 47. Turning the knob while closing a door. I still do this even though I'm in a healthy relationship now. I would feel the discontent of an angry partner if I dared to wake him. Did you ever use your other hand to rest on the door frame and slowly push the door closed with your thumb as you turn the knob? This would prevent the sound of the door hitting the frame as it closed. I'm 40 years old and I still subconsciously do this every time I close a door. I would also hold the microwave door button down while trying to silently close the door. I never watched television with the sound on, and my kids and I would whisper to each other if he was napping. The kids had to play with noisy toys on the balcony. We felt happier and safer if my ex was asleep. Took many years to try and be normal. My son, who is now in middle school, still cries silently or throws a fit in a whisper. I often catch him fussing into a pillow so no one hears him. It's so sad now that I look back and realize the signs of trauma my kids adopted. Leaving everything behind, running away, and starting over was the hardest yet best thing my kids and I have ever done. It's heartbreaking to see everyone's responses. The world can be cruel. I hope each of you can heal and find your strength and sense of purpose in this life. It really is beautiful when you share life with the right person. Story 48. I startle easily when someone else enters the room, particularly if they are male. I am also very protective of my bedroom, safe space, and possessions, especially if I suspect that the person assumes they can take things without permission. However, for everything else, I am a very generous person. Story 49. It took me years to be able to casually sit on the couch when my husband got home. My family would come in, see me sitting leisurely, and assume I had done nothing all day and was being useless or lazy. It took a long time to realize that it is normal and I can, in fact, just be lounging, watching TV, or reading a book when my husband gets home. Story 50. I grew up in a few abusive households. My birth mother never noticed my brother and me having bruises or how men scared us. My father is an addict and was generally violent and abusive. My grades were only considered good enough if they were perfect. I placed fourth in a state spelling bee in 8th grade and was made to feel guilty because I lost, even though we had driven 2 hours to get there. I have to pause sometimes during meals and realize that my boys probably ate plenty, and that I don't have to feel guilty when my 5-year-old takes about 6 bites and proclaims that if he has more, his elbow will explode and his legs will stop working. He is endlessly entertaining with his hyperbolic statements. I don't want them to ever feel hungry or think that nobody around them loves them unless they are useful. I don't want them to distrust a smile. I don't want them to feel the need to be as unremarkable as possible to avoid attention. My gentleness, my calm voice, and my distrust are meant to protect me. If someone knows you, they can hurt you. That's a lesson I don't want them to learn. I want to protect them as I needed protection. Story 51. I possess many traits on this list, but 2 unique ones I haven't encountered yet are: I have a very annoying nervous laugh, which developed as a way to decrease tension at a young age. I pick the skin around my fingers to the point of bleeding and pain. These habits, of course, impact my self-esteem, and I sometimes feel ostracized. Story 52. A sign for me is hypervigilance and reactivity. Getting defensive or upset easily, jumping to conclusions too quickly, and assuming the worst-case scenario. Feeling guilty until proven innocent. Constantly feeling like your nervous system has a mind of its own and worrying that it will sabotage or embarrass you around others. Not being able to have stable relationships because you're always overthinking, overreacting, or being too critical of yourself. Preemptively assuming you've done something wrong and resenting others as if they are accusing you when it's actually your own inner critic. The frustration of living like this pushes you to the edge regularly and drives others away because they don't understand the chaos that is your everyday life. This leads to being resented by others, adding shame, desperation, and self-hatred, which then causes you to isolate to spare others and to avoid watching yourself damage every friendship or relationship. However, isolating removes your connection to normalcy and a support system, leading you to spiral because you have nothing to reference to help determine whether you're being irrationally unfair to yourself or if your feelings are valid, making it worse. When you finally meet someone new, You may feel happiness, but also terror that you'll repeat the same cycle, which you probably will. And it goes on and on. Story 53. Extremely personable and quick thinking. There is a lack of trust even after years. They remain quiet and calm when everyone else is losing control and have a distant gaze. They appreciate even the smallest acts of kindness. Story 54. You cannot make them jump. To be startled, you first need two things to happen. The person must have a lack of awareness of their surroundings and be relatively relaxed. You can make me jump, but only if you are one of the select few people I actually relax around. Everyone else, I subconsciously track throughout the house. So how can you scare me if I know where you are? Story 55. Being highly attuned to people's moods and being able to immediately identify when they are not in a good mood. Story 56. I have seen in stores when a parent lifts a hand to get something off the counter, and their child automatically ducks out of the way to avoid being hit. Story 57. Being friendly with acquaintances while maintaining some distance, as friendships and relationships are often temporary. Story 58. You do not feel comfortable at parties or celebrations and never initiate them. Relaxation brings stress because it feels like life will inevitably respond with disappointment to compensate for the bit of joy. Story 59. I find myself easily startled. If someone walks into a room and I don't hear them, I scream or feel as if my heart stops. It often happens that I jump or react strongly to being scared. Additionally, I feel like I am overstaying my welcome in someone's house, or that I am in the way or being intrusive in someone's space. Story 60. Almost everything resonates with me. I know my parents were very damaged as children and continued that trend with me. My sister is 9 years younger and had a very different life than I did. I have a lot of childhood trauma and wounding, which makes me ambivalent about it most of the time. It has given me quirks that make me interesting, occasionally funny. I have broken several generational cycles, and that makes me happy. Story 61. I am really good at ducking. Back when I was a bouncer, I was working in the downstairs bar when someone said there was a fight in the upstairs bar. I went up the stairs and took a couple of steps onto the dance floor. My friend was right behind me, and my ex-husband was halfway up the stairs. I saw a beer bottle hurtling through the air and yelled, "Duck," as I hit the floor. The beer bottle flew over my head and hit my friend in the forehead, then flipped over her head and somehow struck my ex-husband in the head. I can also grab just about anything thrown at me right out of the air. I got a lot of practice as a kid. I had things like stereos and soda cans thrown at me. They actually got mad at me as if it was my fault. I asked why they didn't duck when I yelled duck. They said it was because they didn't know why I yelled that. So, just for future reference, if someone yells duck, you should duck and find out why afterward. Story 62. I grew up in a household where violence was normalized. I can't stand hair tickling my face because it reminds me of fighting and being smothered. Survival mode is immediately activated. Story 63. Always be ready to go back to your car in case your mom takes you out in the middle of the night because you're getting kicked out in the morning. Story 64. Eating quickly and being vigilant about fully finishing a served meal, while ensuring others do the same, can be a reflexive response to uncertainty about when and where the next meal will come from, as well as a desire to avoid waste. It is a subtle behavior, but once you notice it in someone, it is difficult to ignore. Story 65. My quiet sign is adrenal fatigue, which leads to decreased cortisol and levels that are close to Addison's disease. If you see yourself in these comments, get your cortisol levels checked. Story 66. When they get a space of their own, they are very protective of it. Story 67. Not celebrating good news or getting excited about something like a promotion because good things can be taken away in an instant, and disappointment is always lurking nearby. Story 68. Feeling like you're going to die after confronting someone and immediately apologizing for having emotions, while feeling dirty for apologizing and stupid for expressing your emotions in front of another person. Story 69. Accused of being cheap, you became so accustomed to living on a budget that you always ask for the price or discount of everything. You use coupons and analyze every personal non-essential expense, even when you have a six-figure salary. Story 70. Apologizing or saying thank you too often can be problematic. I tend to apologize too frequently, and when someone expresses gratitude, I immediately respond with a thank you instead of saying you're welcome. Story 71. It may not be seen as a clear sign, but a higher number of health issues than normal appears to be a common concern among abuse victims. They may not express it, but it is likely that the victims are enduring challenges and experiencing increased stress even years after the abuse. Story 72. When I was in middle school, I was a lunch monitor for the first graders, and one little girl used to spend a long time in the bathroom. One time, I went to check on her, and she was using hand soap and paper towels to clean herself. She said she didn't know when she would get to take a bath. That was heartbreaking. Story 73. Reading these comments is a bit too real. My parents weren't abusive. However, with attention deficit disorder and undiagnosed dyslexia, I grew up feeling like I did everything wrong. This was in the 1970s when the only treatment for attention deficit disorder was Ritalin. When I took the test for dyslexia, the lady administering the test at the end of the day said, "You don't have it very badly, so you probably won't even notice." Story 74. They get very anxious if the fridge or pantry are not filled, despite how much they actually eat. Story 75. Being overly sensitive to others' emotions makes me anxious or causes me to cry uncontrollably if anyone yells at me, if I feel dismissed, if my decisions are disapproved, or if I feel like no one understands me. I also try not to cry in front of anyone and struggle in silence. Story 76. Emotionally eating to make myself feel better because that was the only feeling of support and safety I had growing up. My parents encouraged me to suppress my emotions and did not care to address them. It was always about pushing my emotions down and pretending nothing happened. Story 77. Absolutely terrified of making a mistake. I am confused that people like me. The rest of it has been covered extensively in this conversation. Story 78. Remembering the exact words in every conversation and being explicit and detailed with everything I say are direct consequences of constant manipulation. Story 79. Does not instigate conflict even when appropriate, but once the total amount of mistreatment crosses a threshold, either leaves the situation or expresses the totality of pent-up appropriate conflict all at once, which may seem like an overreaction to the abuser and everyone else who turned a blind eye to the mistreatment. Has an absolute dislike of sudden scares, frightening entertainment, and similar experiences. When your entire upbringing was spent in genuine fear, it is difficult to find any fear entertaining. Has a strong focus on personal safety. Someone who has endured significant trauma and is unwilling to tolerate any more may be armed to the legal limit. If you display behaviors they were taught are precursors to violence, you could find yourself facing the consequences of that armament. Story 80. Not being able to tolerate the typical loudness of children, as loud noises were associated with anger or someone being hurt. Story 81. Maybe it's just me, but I never want to be late, not even by 1 minute. In fact, I aim to be early for everything. I believe people wouldn't wait for me if I were late, or they might think I am unreliable. I only realized this recently. It's a form of people-pleasing. Story 82. I strongly suspect I have undiagnosed attention deficit hyperactivity disorder for other reasons, but I believe I had severe time blindness as a child, as well as dissociation. I believe this because I would be minding my own business and suddenly find myself being lifted in the air, dragged out of a car, or pushed into the bathtub. My family called me "pokey little puppy" because I could never move fast enough for them, which particularly frustrated my mother. She would just drag me around instead of waiting for me to do anything and was constantly irritated with me for it. As an adult, I do everything quickly. I walk fast, drive fast, read fast, eat fast, etc. It gives me extreme anxiety to make people wait for me or when I'm late, which still happens often because of time blindness and dissociation. I've never heard anyone mention this before, so I wonder if I'm alone. Story 83. I do not like accepting gifts because, growing up, gifts were not actually gifts, just another way to demand some type of payback or to imply that I now owed them something. Story 84. My mom and I shared a room until I was a teenager. She would often slip out in the middle of the night to go to parties. It was traumatic to wake up and find her gone. Now, I always wake up when I sense someone leaving the room or the house. I cannot explain why, but I don't even have to look around to know when a presence is no longer with me. I dislike this feeling, and the stress of it makes me prefer being alone. Additionally, I have developed multiple autoimmune issues which I believe are caused by trauma. I work in a profession that helps people and walk beside them during their difficult times. I cannot stand the thought of others suffering alone. Story 85. I will assume my natural ability to lie and fake emotions serves as a red alert sign. Story 86. I've never thought of myself as someone who grew up in survival mode, but I resonate with many comments. Story 87. I finally make more money than I spend, but it never occurs to me that I can just go out and buy the things I have been wanting. I find it impossible to justify spending money on items that are not strictly necessary. At the same time, when someone asks to borrow money, I will rarely say no unless I feel they are taking advantage of me. Story 88. They are hyper-independent, almost allergic to asking for help. You offer a hand, and they turn it down even when they are clearly struggling. They have learned not to rely on anyone because, while growing up, no one may have shown up when they needed it. Story 89. Apologizing constantly and asking questions like, "Are you mad at me? Was I too intense with that person? Am I overreacting?" I know because I experienced it. Story 90. Extreme anxiety occurs when someone arrives at the door unexpectedly. I often experience a full panic attack and have to hide in the bathroom until they leave. Story 91. Questions often arise when someone receives a compliment because they want to understand the other person's intentions. What is the underlying motive? It seems that not being able to accept a compliment stems from a belief that it must be motivated by something else. This perspective may explain why some individuals struggle with receiving compliments and rarely offer them to others. Story 92. This is concerning. I relate to almost all of these comments. I didn't realize I grew up in survival mode, and I am not sure what that really means. Seems I need to do some reading. Story 93. We often hesitate to ask others for help, even when we genuinely need it. Feelings of hurt, doubt, or mistreatment can build up and overflow at unexpected moments. Additionally, we frequently feel exhausted. Staying constantly alert, even during sleep, takes a toll on us both mentally and physically. Story 94. Switching to the other side of the road whenever passing a group of young people. Disappearing from an event with a group of people without notification so that no one would notice. Eventually, someone does notice and wonders why. Flinching whenever the doorbell or phone rings. Story 95. Thanks to everyone for the support in this discussion. Seriously, hugs to all. We are all just doing our best to live and thrive in this crazy world. Story 96. Anticipating the needs of others before they arise involves ensuring that they are prepared to handle any situation that may occur, often by stocking up on food, typically in their bedroom. Story 97. Always okay. Our arm could be hanging by a thread, we could be in the depths of depression, or fighting for our lives with cancer. But if you ask us how we are always okay. Story 98. This entire list represents me. Hyper-vigilance. Always apologizing, trying to break this habit. Walking quietly so no one hears me coming. Asking for help only as a last resort. Staying silent and keeping to myself. Reading the room. If the vibes are off, I notice. Going through scenarios in my head when I'm out. Generally feeling stiff. It's okay. Don't worry about it. Protective of my sleep schedule and daily routine. Eating quickly. Story 99. They don't talk much and they can walk quietly. I don't know how universal this is, but I grew up avoiding a few people in my own home and learned that quiet basically means safe. Now that I'm out of that house, I still have a habit of sneaking up on people, even when I'm not trying to. I've been told I appear in and out of rooms. I think it's kind of funny, but I am very aware that I learned it as a trauma response. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.